All right, what's up, friends? I've got a confession to make. I broke the streak, not because it was like a holiday, but because I was being a perfectionist. So the whole point of this 30-day challenge is to be able to do the thing consistently, not be so focused on production. And I got to come clean, but also I want to explain some of what I've learned in the process, because it actually took me a moment to really reflect, like, what is it that threw me off, especially because the last episode was about the messy middle and keeping perspective and all that. So actually, a lot of really interesting things have come up in reflecting about this. So that's what this episode is about. It's kind of going a little bit deeper into like what can interrupt the creative process and what are the steps to get back on track. So first, I'm going to tell a story about how I got involved in this whole idea of like creativity studies in the first place. And secondly, I'm going to talk about the process itself. What are some of the things that I've noticed really interrupt the creative process and get in the way? And then the third thing, I'm going to talk about the tension between structure and improvisation and how I've come to understand that over the years as a musician, but also someone who's involved in the creative work with my clients. So years ago, I worked at a cafe. I actually worked in the food service industry for about 10 years. And I worked at this cafe called Mandible. It was at a library at Cornell University called Man Library. So it's just like a clever name, you know. And it would probably be a lot of people's worst nightmare to work at a place where there's lines out the door and you're basically just spreading cream cheese on bagels and making espresso drinks for college kids, right? But it wasn't the worst job. The staff was friendly. People were having fun. We were joking. We were, moving really fast. I felt respected. I felt like I had dignity, even if I wasn't getting that from the customers. And it was just overall like a very effective business. And it was not a big corporate business where everything was pre-portioned and timers and stuff like that. I've worked at places like that too. This was a small business run by locals. So at one point I went to my boss and I said, what are you doing? What's the philosophy? And she recommended a book to me called Getting Things Done by David Allen. And I would say that at the time I was pretty closed-minded to reading any books with, guys dressed up in suits, sitting on stools, talking about productivity. I wasn't particularly interested, but I respected her and I wanted to see what this was about. So I read the book and I actually started to dig in a little bit. And what I learned was that I had been taking on all these ambitious ideas and dreams and projects, but I was completely just winging it. I had no methodology whatsoever. I had no structure or philosophy or framework that I was bringing to my creativity. And I'm talking about creativity here, not productivity, but that's my reframe, because productivity does have a certain connotation to it. But the funny thing is that if you spend any time reading about productivity or looking at YouTube channels or podcasts or books in that space, the people that really rise to the top aren't really talking about productivity in like an economic sense. They're talking about presence. They're talking about creativity. They're talking about passion, answering your calling, doing what you're meant to do, making space, understanding yourself, being humble, being wise, learning, listening, respecting rest. That's really what they're talking about. And so it's funny because with productivity being the term that's out there so much, it makes it kind of difficult to talk about it. difficult to talk to at least my friends about it. Most of them don't really understand what it's all about. And so I like to think about it as like creativity studies. That just helps me. Plus, I feel like that's really grounded for me. So, found a good spot to sit down here. Shayla, come on. Got Shayla with me, so she just had a little dip in the water, and we're just gonna have a little rest now that we're at the top of the hill. But anyway, David Allen's method is actually really simple, and he would draw upon lots of different ideas and in his body of work. One of those ideas is just the idea of mind like water. So he would often compare the creative flow with martial arts, and he would talk about how you don't want to overreact to things and you don't want to underreact to things. So for example, like let's say I get a flat tire. Or actually, a better example is, let's say I've got a problem with my bearings, or the tires are all worn out, and I need to go replace them. If I overreact, then I'm going to be stressed out about it. I'm going to overthink it. I'm going to spend tons of time comparing prices and talking to people. I'm just going to give it way too much attention than it deserves. And if I underreact to this thing that needs to happen, then I'm going to ignore it until it's too late, until it becomes a crisis, until I have to have a tow truck come and take my car to the shop. So we can just approach like everyday life, everyday tasks like this. And he really lays out in his book a whole workflow for understanding how to collect the ideas that we have, collect the responsibilities, the to-dos, the items, the mail, all that stuff into an inbox, and separate the process of collecting things from actually processing it. So collection should just be a habit. Processing it is the mindset of making decisions. Organizing it is putting things into the appropriate places where it can take action on them. So setting reminders, scheduling stuff, putting stuff away. Reviewing it is just the practice of like looking at my calendar, looking at my to-do list before I start my day or before I plan my week, and then doing things. And as we do things, we're collecting new things. And that's just like a cycle of collecting, processing, organizing, reviewing, and doing. And that's what Kathleen taught me. She said that that's what we were doing. That's what she was doing. That's what the whole business had grown around, that idea of just making sure that ideas were being heard, that decisions were being made when you were in the right state of mind, that reminders were being placed where they needed to be, that everything was in its place so that we could review it, we could access it, and we could take action. And just basically the lesson out of all that is just that being organized isn't about feeling boxed in. It's about having the freedom to play, to make jokes with your colleagues, to move quickly, to develop my own craft. So here I am, making sandwiches and coffee, but because everything is in its place, I'm present, I'm chatty, I'm listening to music, I'm dreaming about the projects that I'm working on outside of work. All right, so the next thing is just like falling off of the pattern. First, what happened was I recorded an episode and then I did the thing that always gets in my way, which is I re-recorded it. Yeah, so I basically stopped recording. I thought that wasn't really good enough. I'm gonna try it again. And then the moment I'm trying it again, I'm like saying the same thing over again. And I'm like, did I say it better the first time or the second time? There's like loud noises. I'm getting interrupted. I'm gonna have to edit this. Another thing that happened is that I started imagining people watching the videos who wouldn't understand what this is all about. And I would imagine them watching it and thinking like, why is Ryan doing this thing and not doing this other thing that's more important? Or whatever. I would just like start imagining the types of criticisms that people would have if they were watching this or listening to this podcast. And it was really discouraging. It was super, super discouraging. So anyway, so here I am. In fact, I feel myself like starting to get pulled in that direction right now. I'm starting to feel like I have to explain why I'm doing this. I have to start, talking to that critical person. Well, that's the thing. Like, that's it right there. Like, that's the thing that's been interrupting me all these years. But I'm curious, like, what other people's internal critic sounds like and how it shows up and when it shows up. But for me, I'll start comparing myself to someone who's been doing the thing so much longer than I have, or that is just like so at the top of their game. And I'm like comparing like the very first like 10 or 15 or even 50 things to this something that I like really, really, truly admire. And I'm judging myself against it. And that's just, one, it's unfair. I would never I guess I wouldn't really pass that kind of judgment on others. And if I do, I'd want to catch myself doing it and slow it down. It's not about getting it right. It's not about making the most eloquent essay because, again, I'm improvising. And that leads me to the third topic for today, which is all about structure and improv. So I grew up in a musical family. I grew up around a lot of old-time music, which is like Appalachian string band music, banjo, fiddle, guitar, bass. I also grew up around a lot of jazz. And so both of these types of music are really based on that tension between structure and improv. And what's really beautiful about it is that the structure is all about like creating something where people can be on the same page, where musicians can show up and say, what key are we playing in? Oh, that tune? Yeah, I know that tune. Let's do it. Or, hey, kick us off. And then somebody starts, playing fiddle or, playing piano, and everybody kind of dials in and joins in. And it's because of the structure that people are able to really freestyle and play with each other. And it's because of the competence and the experience of the musicians that people are able to get really present and really aligned and really connected. And it's really a beautiful thing to be around that type of music, because I started dancing when I was younger. I used to do what's called flat foot dancing or clogging, and I still do it. I don't do it all the time, but I can do it. Maybe someday I'll show you. But and then I eventually started playing string instruments, playing drums, stuff like that. I never learned how to read sheet music. In fact, I still don't know how to read sheet music. Kind of wish I did. I'm not like particularly, proud of that fact. I don't think that sheet music is a bad thing. I don't think it's too much structure or anything like that. But I never learned how to read it because I didn't need to. I was learning how to play music in this style where you just listen and you jump in. And because of that, I am a very present and competent musician sometimes. There are keys I don't know how to play in. There's stuff that I haven't quite trained my muscle memory on. There are tunes that I would need to practice, of course. But it's really a unique experience. And I think that when it comes to creativity and practice and writing and design and public speaking and all that kind of stuff, that just a little bit of structure is all we need to really make it work. And I don't really want to develop a habit of reading a teleprompter or being scripted in any way. In fact, that was one of the other things that threw me off, as I started thinking, I really need to get a podcast intro, because I need to set the context Otherwise, these videos are just rambling and it's not super clear. I should get an intro down, and I scripted it out and I spent a whole bunch of time practicing it. And ultimately I started overthinking and I started getting nervous, and I would record an episode, and because I was nervous and scripted, it just like didn't feel like I was being present, right? So with enough practice, I think I'll be able to really freestyle the intro moving forward. But so I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I took the time to be prepared and start to create some structure, because again, with the practice and with the competence, then I can be truly present, which is when the improv starts to happen. So here's a structure that I'm going to start using, and I kind of attempted it in this episode, which is that I'm going to pick 3 things. I will pick like a topic that I want to talk about. Like this episode is about, creativity. But then I'll break that into 3 things. So this episode, it was like, what's the origin story for me around like how I got into creativity studies and productivity. Oh, some really loud dogs down there. Yeah, so the first thing was that origin story. The second thing was reflecting on what are the challenges that come up for me, the inner critic. And the third thing is this reflection on structure and improv. Well, I'm gonna use 3s because 3 is a really great number for wrapping up a concept, breaking it down into parts that are easy to remember. So then it'll be easy for me to remember it when I'm just freestyling. And if I want to go deeper in an outline, if I were to outline this on paper, then I could just do groups of 3 underneath that. So each of those 3 things could have 3 things under that, and so on and so forth. So I actually started outlining some episodes, which was really fun. I outlined my introduction. I outlined a 3-month plan. And just using the number 3 in the way that I structure content planning, extremely helpful. And this is something that I've done actually with clients as well. So I was like, well, I should do that here on the podcast. And moving forward, I can see how that starts to express itself in the episodes. So I invite you to point it out, see if you can spot it, and leave a comment about it. But also, give it a shot and let me know how it goes. Break things into 3s. All right, well, I think that about does it for this episode. This has been really fun. I've enjoyed reflecting and talking to you. And I'll see you in the next episode of Super Connectors. Take care. Bye.